When, in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation.
We hold these truths to be self-evident, and that all men are created equal, and that they are endowed by their Creator with certain What's that word there?
Unalienable.
With certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
That whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is in the right of the people to alter or abolish it, and to institute new government. The history of the present King of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries, all having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states.
In every stage of these oppressions, we have petitioned for redress in the most humble terms. Our repeated petitions have been answered only by repeated injury. A prince, whose character is thus marked by every act which may define a tyrant, is unfit to be the ruler of a free people.
We, therefore, the representatives of the United States of America, solemnly publish and declare that these united colonies are, and of right ought to be, free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown.
And for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. Bless you.
God save our American states!
God save our American states!
Big calves.
Liberty Bell right in there.
Go Cat Labs.
Hey, did you film that part?
I filmed it all.
Can you? Did you film that?
Mom, Dad. Strolling down Independence Parkway. Home of Independence. Now we're about to enter into the pavilion of the Liberty
I
Bell.
got you guys in the picture.
So we'll go check that out in there. That's pretty cool. How's everybody like to be here in historic Philadelphia?
Really cool.
Yeah, the dream of a lifetime. Thank you.
No, the Lord told me to come here just so y'all can come here too.
It's been worth it.
Let's go inside.
Named John Pass and John Stowe, and thus the inscription on the front. And it hung in the Pennsylvania State House Tower, which is now known as Independence Hall, for about 93 years. So it had a pretty good amount of time as a working bell. Now, ironically, the bell was not heard on July 4th, 1776, like a lot of us believe. Although Congress passed the Declaration of Independence on that day, it wasn't until a few days later, that on July 8th, 1776, that all the nearby bells rang in celebration. Okay, so it wasn't on the 4th, but it was on the 8th. Now, about a year later, the war with England wasn't going so well, and the British were coming close to Philadelphia. So fearing that they might actually take this bell and melt it and use it as cannonball fire against the colonists sent it out to Allentown for a little vacation. So it spent a few months in Allentown in the basement of a church. And then eventually did return to Philadelphia, obviously, after the British had evacuated in Philadelphia. Now, I know that some of you are saying, well, when did it crack and how did it crack? And unfortunately, historians aren't really sure of exactly when it cracked. A safe assumption is to say that it occurred between 1841 and 1845. And how it cracked, they're pretty sure that it was just from old age. The bell did ring for 93 years. Okay. Now, what you see here, the gap that you see, is where the original crack had occurred. But this is a man-made gap that you see here. And they needed to repair the bell. It was cracked, and they wanted to ring it for George Washington's birthday in February of 1846. So they drilled into the crack, they widened it, and they filed the sides so that the sides wouldn't reverberate against each other. This is how they repair bells, strangely enough. They don't solder the sides together. A good example of a bell that's working today that has a gap in it, like this, is Big Ben in London. Okay, so they were ringing this bell, they fixed it, and they were ringing it on George Washington's birthday up in the tower. Okay, but then they noticed that it was getting a funny buzzing noise. And they soon realized that it was cracked again. And unfortunately, that was the crack that silenced the bell. So they retired the Liberty, or it wasn't known as the Liberty Bell then, but they retired the old State House bell. And they brought it down into the first floor of Independence Hall. And after a while, it got some notoriety to it. A lot of statesmen, a lot of foreign dignitaries were coming to see the old State House bell. Due in fact to a lot of rumors that we now know aren't true, that this was the bell that rang on July 4th. Okay. Now, it really wasn't known as the Liberty Bell for quite some time, and we owe credit to the abolitionists of the time, the anti-slavery movement. They adopted this bell as a symbol of their movement. So in all their pamphlets and their publications and their flyers and things that they handed out, they had a picture of the Liberty Bell. And they even wrote a poem called the Liberty Bell. And they saw that the inscription around the bell, which you can get a better look at a little later, it says, "Proclaim liberty throughout all the land unto all the inhabitants thereof." And they saw that inscription as a fitting theme for their movement. So thus, the old State House bell soon became known as the Liberty Bell. And then in the later half of the 19th century, the bell took to the road as a traveling ambassador. The city of New Orleans wanted to see the bell. They fought in the Revolution, and they felt as though they deserved to see the bell as well. So Philadelphia agreed and sent it to New Orleans. And then eventually, the bell traveled to many other cities and towns across the United States. It might have even been in one of your towns many years ago. But they noticed it was getting damaged, being out on the road. So after visiting San Francisco in 1915, they brought the bell back to Philadelphia. They placed it back in Independence Hall on the first floor, where it's been ever since, until it came here in 1976, where it's located right now. They had a very nice midnight procession on January 1st. They brought the bell down here, and it's been here ever since. They feared that the crowds for the bicentennial might actually ruin Independence Hall's floors and some other fixtures. So it's been here ever since. So yeah, some say it's a small bell compared to other bells that they might have seen hanging in towers or other symbols. But yet this is really, again, one of the greatest, most recognized, most revered symbols of freedom that we have in this country. So we need to do a lot to preserve this bell, and so that our grandchildren can someday come and see it. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. If you want to take some pictures, we ask if you can clear out the center.
Checking underneath.
It's a good story, though.
Yeah, got it.
See what it looks like underneath. Got under the veil. Ma.
They're not really sure of the exact
Picture of you? No, you want me to get one of you, man. Yes, the crack. Almost come apart.
They wanted to ring it on
This was Benjamin Franklin's old house, and this is where he had the printing office. Like that cartoon, Ben and Me. Very much.
Hello there, you.
Hey, people are strange. See, look at this.
I'm walking where Benjamin Franklin walked every single day.
Cobblestone streets. Brethren, that the Book of Mormon was the keystone of our religion, and that a man would get nearer to God by abiding by its precepts than by any other book. It was the most critical. That, my friends, is a real keystone, as it holds in place this arch. He went in the post office. This is actual, this is the foundation. It's glass. But through the bottom you can see the foundation of Benjamin Franklin's old home. It's been torn down, but this little square action that we're walking about is where his home used to be. You're walking through his home, Mom. How do you like that? Alright. There's the little entrance. We might go in there. Check it. Franklin, man of unlimited dimension. Look at the words from wherever you're standing.
Mr.
Is that Jared? Or is that Jared? Or is that Jared? Oh, he's there. I don't know, get him off there.
There's telephones all in that room.
My mom and dad.
Well,
Back
that
to
is the
her.
other side of Independence Hall. And that's the view on the back of the one that.
Here we are at Independence Hall once again.
Yeah,